Hello and welcome to Showtuned, a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through songs.
Each week, we get to sit down and we explore all of the myriad ways that songs tell stories, from melodies to harmonies, lyrics to dialogue, characters to scenes, and how it all comes together in this unique medium where songs are really the engine of the story. My name is Brett Boles. I'm a professional songwriter. I'm an educator. I am the creator of the hit TikTok and Instagram series, The MT, and the founder of the MT Studio, where I've been spilling the tea on why certain musical theater songs make us feel all the things. And I also help songwriters hone their craft.
That's right. And I am Josh Shelton, your very grateful co-host to be talking about musicals with Brett. I am a filmmaker and a songwriter and a jazz musician, but my love of movie musicals opened me up to obviously the world of musical theater. And now I have a film company called Counterpoint Musicals, where we are reinventing the movie musical. I'm bringing the worlds together. And as part of that, I just think there's so much opportunity to explore this completely unique medium where we tell stories with songs and how do the songs work and everything you just said, Brett. So this podcast is meant to be that, an exploration of the genre, the medium of musicals. And it's for anyone who loves musicals, whether you're a musical writer or a songwriter or a performer. We want to share these ideas and these conversations with you. And our goal is that you'll find something interesting here. Today on the show, we are going to talk about another one of the basics, song structure, song form, and how the different types of song structures can benefit certain types of storytelling, the sort of pros and cons of each.
Yeah, and on the surface, that may sound kind of boring, but I promise you, it's interesting.
Of course it is. We are going to dig in, and there are sort of the three main types that we're going to talk about: the verse chorus, AABA, and through composed. We're just going to start there. But before we get into that, we want to make sure we start with our first topic, which is our I Want song for the week. And also, for any paid members on Patreon, we are going to have bonus content where we're going to dive specifically into the form structure of the iconic Alan Menken song, Part of Your World, because Brett, I think you have some tea to spill about that.
I do have some tea to spill on that, including some lyrics you may not be familiar with.
If you want to hop over to Patreon, you can join as a free member. We are building a community there. But if you are able to support the podcast and want to contribute, you can become a paid member. You get bonus content there. And also, we're just really grateful to have anyone join the conversation, be part of the community. But speaking of Part of Your World, that is an I Want song. And so for our first segment of the episode, what is your I Want song for the week? We want to share a little bit of, set some intention for ourselves. Do you want to go first, Brett, or should I?
I'm happy to go first today. My I Want song for the week comes with a little bit of a story, just a short story. So for a long time, my girlfriend's father was involved with car racing, which is definitely not something that I do, but he's obsessed with cars, and he's been noticing for a while that my right front passenger tire was getting pretty bald to the point where actually last night when I left Massachusetts to drive back to Connecticut, the tire was so bad that all the rubber was gone from places of it, and it was like all the way down to the cord. It was really bad. So I took it today to get 4 new tires put on my car. So my I Want song for the week is tires.
Tires.
And all the places that wheels will get you.
I want new tires. That is a great potential launching point because, of course, so many metaphors there.
Oh my God. Wheels of a dream.
Yep. New tires, new tread, all sorts of ways to take that. New tires, literally, is what you want this week. I love that. My I Want song for the week is I've been in a couple projects and situations where it felt like there were too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, or that's the concern that there might be too many voices, chiming in. So my approach for some of these in particular is to not be a cook, to not try to overstir the pot, but to just add a little spice. That's my I want song for the week. I want to make sure I'm adding spice, but not, getting in the way of the chef, not overcomplicating the situation, but make sure I add a little spice.
I love that. That's great. Little spice, a little bit of spice never hurt anybody.
Yeah, just help with help build flavor. I do want to remind everyone, if you have your I want song for the week, if you have something that you want to achieve this week or this month or this year, share it. We think it's important to add a little intention, add a goal, give yourself the freedom to also maybe want a little extra sleep or want to, do whatever it is you think you want to do this week. Share your I want song for the week, and we might mention it, or maybe someone will write a song about it. Now, moving on, I want to learn about song structures and song forms. I'm going to toss it off to you, Brett. Where do you want to start?
Oh, I think the best place to start is with the song form that most people are familiar with, because this is the form that most pop songs take. Most songs you hear on the radio will take this form, and that is verse-chorus form. A verse-chorus form usually goes verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. That is usually the way it goes. Sometimes you'll have a pre-chorus inserted between the verse and the chorus. Sometimes there'll even be a post-chorus after the chorus. I'm thinking like Ed Sheeran's The Shape of You has a post-chorus in it. So there are slight variations within that form, but for the most part, you will find the vast majority of pop songs are verse-chorus form. And what that usually means is that you have a full chorus that repeats a number of times, usually 3 times, sometimes more, usually 3 times. And that chorus, which also in pop music is often referred to as the hook, like the whole chorus sometimes is referred to as the hook. Sometimes only one line is the hook, and it will be in that chorus somewhere. But you have verses that are different, and you have choruses that repeat. That is verse-chorus form.
I think that's a great breakdown of it, and also the specificity of a hook. When you are writing a pop song or, a song that is not part of a show, oftentimes the hook will mean, what is that hook melody? What is that chorus? Like, we got to find the hook, right? That's the thing we repeat over and over in our head. We've mentioned hook when writing musical theater songs, and that often is, I find, to be more the core idea. What is the phrase, maybe regardless of the actual melodic hook? So that's a good distinction right away. And then also when I think of verse chorus within musical theater, speaking of Alan Menken, there's a song like Whole New World. That is verse chorus, but correct me if I'm wrong, the actual lyrics of the chorus are slightly different because different characters are singing them.
Yes.
And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I think that in a lot of musical theater, the chorus is the same melody. There is a same hook phrase, Whole New World, but then the lyrics will change based on who's singing it.
Yes, that happens a lot. Even if it's one character, a lot of times the verse the chorus will change slightly each time, and that has a very specific purpose in storytelling, which we can get to. But you notice that in "Let It Go" from Frozen 2. Let it go, can't hold it back anymore is the first time, and then let it go, and one with the wind and sky. Let it go. So it changes. The chorus does change each time we hear it because we're getting new information.
Yeah, and that's unique to musicals, but also song structure is sort of story structure in miniature, right? It is still a scene that has to grow and evolve over the course of the song, which is why having the lyrics of the chorus grow and evolve as well, as you just said, always reveals something new, whether it's from the same character or from a different character. And it's actually really fun, I find, to write these types of verse chorus songs in a musical, because you get to keep adjusting it and not just do the same thing over and over again. It can also be a little challenging, but yeah.
Yeah, and you will find that, especially in contemporary musicals, musicals that are written by pop songwriters in particular, you will find more verse chorus songs in those musicals. In addition, like Pasek and Paul, if you think about Dear Evan Hansen, a lot of verse chorus songs in that show, but all of the choruses, almost all of them, don't repeat verbatim. They do change slightly from chorus to chorus. For that very reason, we want to tell a story. We want to move a story forward. It makes it harder to do that when you have an entire chorus that repeats every time. It limits your lyrical real estate for new information and for story momentum.
Absolutely. And I have a show, a musical film that I recently wrote where I had a verse chorus form for a tune. It made a lot of sense. And I will say that I had to be strict with myself, where once I had that chorus in place, I was like, great, we're set. Don't need to rewrite that. But then it's like 3+ minute song. It was already getting to be a little bit of a long song. And I had to go back and say, look, I don't know if I can just say those same words over and over again. How can I adjust? And that's another reminder to ourselves that, like, that's some of the work that we have to put in. While you get the benefit of repeating a chorus 3 times, hey, a little less work. Once you got it, you got it. But on the flip side, you probably have to go back in and mine a little bit more for what is that character saying over the course of those 3 choruses.
Yeah, and you get bonus points if you can do that while making the chorus hit differently every time or mean something different every time. That's always like the holy grail if you can manage to make that happen, but it's not easy to do that.
Yeah. And we've talked about that. That's when you find those great hooks that do change. The tires, your I Want song, if I want tires, the first chorus is very physical, literal tires. The second chorus is like, I want tires, and maybe you say, so I can drive farther and finally leave this town. And maybe by the last time you're like, I got tires and I'm, exploring a whole new vista.
There you go. And you know what we call that, what Pat Pattison calls that. If you don't know who Pat Pattison is, he's like a songwriting guru, and he calls that writing through the boxes. So you take your song and you make boxes out of it, and a lot of times that'll look like moving through time. So we start, maybe we start in the past and then we're in the present and then we go to the future, or we change perspectives. We start with you and then it's I and then it's we. So the song moves, even if it's not a musical theater song, which when you're moving a story forward, the song is still progressing in some way, even if it's a pop song.
Right, exactly. And plenty of great songs written outside of musical theater still do that. But within musicals, whether they're movies or musical theater, we are, much more compelled to do that because we're telling a story. So is there anything, when you think of verse chorus song structure, is there anything specific that might be a helpful way to approach it? Like, what types of scenes call for it, or what are some of the pros and cons about that structure?
Yeah, the way I like to think of it, and this has been a question that students have been asking me for a long time, like, how do I know when to write an AABA versus when to write a verse chorus? It's a very difficult question to answer, but I will say, I think a full chorus is sort of serving as a big idea, and the verses are there to support the big idea of that chorus. Whereas if you're writing, which we'll talk about in a second, in AABA form, where your hook is just one line that comes, somewhere in your A sections, that hook is like a center of gravity or a thesis statement, and it sort of acts as the anchor for the idea that goes around it. So we're writing each A section aimed at the hook. Whereas in a verse chorus song, your verses are all aiming at this big idea of a chorus. So they're slightly different, and it sometimes is a little tricky to know when to use which form, but that's the way I like to think about it.
That's a really great way of looking at it, is big idea, or maybe like massive, emotional reinforcement. Sticking with Disney tunes for a moment, Let It Go. That is like a massive, massive moment for that character. Is literally the transformational moment that we've been building to the whole time. and Let It Go can take on different meanings. That hits so hard. Yes, it also can become a hit pop song, but emotionally for the character, or Whole New World is finally this love. It's this connection between these two characters, and when they say Whole New World, it really reinforces this love story and this connection, and also what both of them want. It's a broader theme of the whole movie, right? She's trapped in the palace and he's down in the streets thinking he's more. Whole New World together. It's this big emotional reinforcement that the chorus allows us to hear and then get stuck with us for the rest of our lives.
And it requires like further exploration. Like A Whole New World is not going to stand on its own as a hook. It needs more it's like, what about A Whole New World? And Let It Go is the same thing. She can't just sing a verse and then just sing Let It Go and with nothing else. Like Let It Go, it requires more. It's such a big idea. It requires more. So it screams for a chorus.
What about on the stage? What are some of these big iconic verse chorus tunes that come to mind for you?
Sure. Well, if we're talking like classic musical theater, we've got Chicago, Candor and Ebb. I mean, maybe one of the most famous is Cell Block Tango. I mean, that's like, that's huge. He had it coming, right? And that chorus repeats over again. And if we want to think more contemporary, well, I guess it's not quite as contemporary anymore. Although they just did a movie, Wicked. If you think about Defying Gravity, that's a huge example of a verse chorus song where Defying Gravity is just not enough to stand on its own. It needs a chorus behind it.
I love those two examples because Defying Gravity is probably more similar to Let It Go and Whole New World. It is this big emotional moment. It's also a moment of connection between the two characters and self. It's actually kind of both of those together. Yeah. But Cell Block Tango, that's a very, very different scene and moment. It's this big ensemble piece. It's a big story sort of environment. It's welcoming you into this world and setting you into the whole perspective. And it's, much earlier in the show. So that's a great reminder of a different moment or scene that can still be such a powerful and perfect verse chorus.
Yeah, it's also interesting too in that one specifically because the verses are not even sung. They're spoken monologues. So the verses become monologues and the choruses are just our song, of the choruses are choruses, which is a lot of fun too.
That's a great point. That's a verse chorus where the verse doesn't even have singing.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's iconic. Yeah. And if you think of any other great verse chorus from the stage, from other iconic Broadway shows, we'd love to hear it. Put it in the comments. We'll also think on it more and come back to it. But I think let's move on to AABA.
AABA, it's my favorite song form. It is very prevalent throughout all of the musical theater canon, and for a very specific reason. AABA is very good for story momentum and for telling a story because essentially, instead of using a chorus that repeats every time, full chorus that repeats every time, you're using one line generally, which is one lyrical line paired with a melody that appears in the A sections. So you'll have an initial A section where you state the idea with the hook inside it. You have a second A section where you sort of restate/develop that idea with the hook in there. And then you depart, you go to a B section, which acts similarly to the way a bridge acts in a verse chorus song, where you're examining the song or the issue in the song from a different angle. Maybe we're zooming in, maybe we're zooming out. And then you have a return to a final A, which is often like an A prime section. Sometimes it's extended, sometimes it's truncated. And oftentimes that can be what we refer to as an AABA chorus. And then once you have a full statement of that AABA chorus, then you can kind of do whatever you want. Sometimes there's a C section that people will put in. Sometimes there'll be a little dialogue break and then maybe return to the B and then a final A. So you can do any number of things as long as you state the AABA in its entirety up front. We also have short form AABA versus long form AABA. So let me break this down for you. So in short form AABA, something like, for example, I've never been in love before from Guys and Dolls. I've never been in love before. Now all at once it's you forevermore. That's A1. And then, I've never been in love before. I thought my heart was safe. I thought I knew the score. That's A2. So they're pretty short phrases. And then the B, and but this is wine that's all too strange and strong. I'm full of foolish song, and out my song must pour. And then we go back to the A. So please forgive this helpless haze I'm in. I've really never been in love before. Now we have a full statement of that short form, AABA. Which means now that one character sang that, there can be a little dialogue, and then the next character can sing a full statement of that AABA. So we get a full statement of that chorus, followed by another full statement of that chorus, and we're not spending 8 minutes listening to a song because it's short form. Then we have a song like The Wizard and I from Wicked, which is what we call long form AABA. If you listen to those A sections, they are considerably longer. I'm not going to sing that for you, but you can go listen to the recording, and they're quite long. We have the first A section, we have a second A section, then the B section is the quote from the wizard that's basically, one day he'll say to me, Elphaba, a girl who is so superior. We have that whole bit. Then we go back to a final statement, a truncated statement of that A, and then we go to the unlimited section, which is like the big C section in the middle, and then we do a final triumphant return to that A. And I'll stand there with the wizard feeling, all that, and then we end it out. We finish it out with a final statement of that A.
Fantastic. And I love that you sang I've Never Been in Love Before.
Love that song.
You sound great. It's one of my favorite songs. Again, as a jazz musician, for me, that's a Chet Baker tune, and that's a tune that I've played tons of times. But that difference of AABA short form and AABA long form is a perfect way to dive in because, again, for the economy of the scene, short form AABA can be so impactful and so powerful and give you room to maybe play against two different characters. And then the long form one is a reminder that as a songwriter, you can develop maybe a single character's emotional journey or psychology or experience of whatever they're dealing with in the scene. And AABA doesn't mean inherently that it's going to be short. There's ways to explore it. Also, I like how you said that after you establish that AABA, that third A, what comes after, you can add a C, you can go back, add a coda. There's all sorts of places to go beyond that based on what you as a songwriter and the scene and the character want.
Yeah, and this sort of brings me to the next topic, which, and a lot of songwriting, the way we write songs and the way we structure songs has a lot to do with human psychology. It really does. And we, as humans, are hardwired to recognize patterns. We rely on patterns in everyday life. We see patterns in everything. Even when there's no pattern there, we see patterns. So when we're constructing a song, we're always trying to walk the fine line. There's this very delicate balance between repetition and variation. What's too much repetition? What's not enough? What's too much variation? What's not enough? And so AABA really helps with that because we state an idea, we're able to restate the idea. By then, the ear is ready for something new. So then we go away to a B section, which is almost always harmonically different, melodically different. It's someplace new. And then when we return to that final A, we feel like we've returned home. So it's just, we have to keep the audience in a place where they're getting enough repetition so they're not getting lost, but enough variation so that they're not getting bored. And it's this constant sort of balance that we're walking as songwriters to make sure that we're keeping an audience engaged in the songs and in the stories that we're telling.
Yeah, and that repetition can be such a powerful tool for connection with the audience. Like you said, once the audience knows what to expect, you can really land comedy. Because when you set up a certain rhyme or a certain phrase, the way you get back to it can be hilarious. They're also expecting it. So there's also an added clarity in what is happening when you're able to come back to the same, end line in AABA. It's a unique tool to use for that, not only storytelling, but engagement and connection with the audience. And similarly, once you've set up whatever the repeated element is, then you can break it to add added comedy or drama, or like you said, add some variance so that the repetition doesn't become overly expected or boring, right?
Yes, setting up expectation and subverting expectation is so powerful. One of my favorite comedic examples of this is Olaf in Frozen. Winter's a good time to stay in and cuddle, but put me in summer and I'll be a happy snowman. It's like because you
Brilliant.
expect puddle to come, but then it doesn't. Of course, we have to explain the joke.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but that's the comedy of that moment is we're setting up an expectation and then we're subverting it.
Yeah, and actually in that one, visually, he's standing in front of a puddle
Right.
when he says it. So they really set that joke up in a whole range of ways. I was actually writing a tune and chatting with a songwriter the other day where we were looking at the rhymes in it. And we realized that the rhymes were there because that's where the rhymes should go. And then there were jokes in the song, because it was more of a comedy song, that were not on the rhyme. Ideally, the joke should be on the rhyme because there's an expectation of the word that will land. And if you're able to put the funniest moment on the rhyme, it adds exclamation point. And we can have a whole other conversation about that. But as it relates to song structure, what's great about AABA is that you have that A and we know where it's going to land. So then when you come back to the second A, there's just a lot of opportunity because of the expectation to then, if you double that down with like having the funniest line or the funniest rhyme on that, end of that second A or the end of the third A, like puddle and happy snowman, we can just, again, how do we get more mileage out of it? How do we make it work?
That's great. I don't have too much to add to that. I mean, other than rhymes are in addition to hooks, to really good hooks and strong hooks, they're guides for our ears. And our job as songwriters is to guide the audience's ear through a song. And we do that with really strong hooks, with walking that line between repetition and variation, and by setting up rhymes appropriately on appropriate words, making sure that the right accents or the right syllables are accented and we're not misaccenting things so it sounds like natural speech and all that jazz.
The one thing I wanted to add to AABA before we move on is I've been in this experience and I could see other songwriters approaching it where, say you have a short form AABA, which maybe is really not that long. How do you know, or how do you decide that you just wrote an AABA song? Or maybe did you just write the verse of a song that should go into a chorus? Because oftentimes the structure of a verse could naturally fall into an AABA form just on a truncated level.
This comes down to what we talked about, I think, in episode 2, which is song mapping. So when you're writing an AABA song and you're mapping out your hook, you're putting your hook in your A section. So if you're doing your song mapping in the effective way, you will know because you will have structured those A sections around that hook, and there will be no question that you're writing an AABA rather than a verse chorus. Also, this is funny because I just had a meeting with someone, a coaching session with somebody today, who was trying to write an AABA song. She had originally written this song in verse chorus form. She's trying to get it into AABA, which she didn't have to do, but she just decided she wanted to try to do it. And I was looking at her thing, and I was like, well, it's still reading as verse chorus to me because really she kind of changed the way that it looked on the page, but it didn't really. There was no real change in the sound, and so the second half of her her quote unquote A section was sounding very much like a pre-chorus, like it was leading to a chorus. And when you have a line that's doing that, that is like a big red flag that says, hey, chorus is coming up now, instead of writing an A section that is building towards a hook at the end of that A section. There is a difference.
That's a great reminder of something we haven't really dug into yet, which is the music side of it. I feel a lot of times we're talking a little bit more lyrically, but the music side of it is also so important to say to understate the obvious. The music side of it shapes how the tune comes across and connects. And so when we're talking about these form and structure, if you're writing AABA musically, you're finding your way back to that resolution as opposed to the end of a verse. While there will be resolution, it's probably also setting up the transition into a chorus or a pre-chorus.
Totally. It is. I will say this for writers who are used to writing in verse chorus form, starting to write in AABA is very disconcerting, and it takes a while to get used to. It took me a while because when I first learned how to do it, I was really only used to writing verse chorus tunes, even though I didn't realize it at the time because I didn't really realize what these different labels and structures were or meant. It took me a little while to get used to structuring a song in AABA form. It's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. And I like that you referenced song mapping, which we talked about in a previous episode. And so if you haven't listened to it, feel free to go back and check it out. But it's a reminder of the difference between just sort of writing a song based on one's own inspiration. Because I think we've all sat down at the piano and said, oh, I kind of have this idea for a song. And you start feeling it around. Maybe you're following a melodic thought or chords, or maybe you have a phrase and we all start sort of improvise writing, right? Which is great. We should always explore and find that. But that can also then sometimes lead us down a path of I'm not really paying attention to structure or form. And I've got some stuff that sounds sort of good, but yeah, it isn't quite getting where I need to go. Maybe that's a good time. Maybe you have a core good idea to say, okay, is this AABA? Am I building towards a repeated hook phrase that is AABA, or am I working towards a chorus? I think that's a great reminder of how this can be helpful and also not get in the way of whatever that spontaneous or type of exploration or improvisatory songwriting.
Sure. I talk about this all the time with my students. We always have these kinds of conversations. And, I am a strong believer in having the tools and techniques at your disposal so that you do not have to wait for the lightning bolt of inspiration to hit, because we can't predict when that is going to happen. And I always say there's nothing as inspirational as a deadline. So I find that song mapping helps me a lot in that way. And it also, my students, I literally just today, we had a call. I have a student in the UK who was on the call today, and we were talking. We always start talking about wins and what's going really well, what can we celebrate. And he's like, I realized the last 2 nights I've been up till 4 a.m. and I've written 3 full lyrics to songs, mostly because of this song mapping thing that I never knew I could do before. And he's like, now I can map out my ideas, and I'm writing so much more than I ever have before. So, pro tip out there: try song mapping. It works.
Absolutely. It definitely works. And speaking of song mapping, though, let's move on to the next form, because it is very different than the other two. And we want to talk about through composed songs.
Yeah. So through composed songs, you don't find too many of these in musicals. But what a through composed song really means, it's more about the music than it is about the lyric, this term through composed, which just means that you don't have any repeated sections, or if you do have repeated sections, there's no real pattern to them. It's just stream of consciousness sort of music that's just composed, and it's all different from beginning to end. There's no real structure holding the whole thing together, which is used more in the concert music world, in avant-garde music, in all this kind of thing, more so than in a story-structured musical theater format. I will say there are certain shows, particularly I'm thinking about The Great Comet of 1812, that does use a lot of through composed techniques, but it is not common in musical theater, and I would not advise anyone to build a musical that way, especially on your first go around, because like we mentioned before, human beings are suckers for pattern recognition, and when we can't recognize patterns and stuff, we tend to get lost, and we don't want to lose an audience. That will be my warning about through composed music in musicals.
Can you dig a little deeper into just making sure everyone understands what through composed is, maybe with some examples to help us wrap our head around it?
One example of through composed music in musical theater, I know we mentioned the Great Comet of 1812, or Natasha, Pierre, and the Great Comet of 1812, otherwise known colloquially as Great Comet. There's a song called "No One Else," which is pretty much through composed. So it means that you were it's like a rambling monologue that has no real repeated anything. There's no hook that repeats. There's no musical motif that repeats. Now, that's not entirely true for No One Else, because No One Else has a couple little things that come back, but by and large, it's through composed. There's no large chunk of that song that repeats like an AABA would, or like a verse chorus would.
Yeah, I would say that with through composed, the benefit you have is that you can truly take a character on a almost stream of consciousness journey, right? And there is it's still a song. There, it isn't that you literally repeat nothing. You might have like a little melody that happens and you kind of come back to that, but it's more like a thought process. I'm going from here to there, or I'm dealing with this, or I'm really angry at you and I'm yelling, 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 and something. I just, we were chatting about this. I asked if Your Fault from Into the Woods is through composed, but you said no, not quite, because it has an anchor. But a song that is able to just really go and just sort of be like a jazz solo, right?
Yeah, I feel like in musical theater, we get songs that mimic the structure of a through composed song while still maintaining a little bit of structural integrity. Like if you think about like Rose's Turn from Gypsy, I mean that song is like all over the place and could you kind of get the sense of it being through composed. It's not really. There are motifs that repeat, and there are things that anchor it, and especially themes that we've heard in other songs from the show that kind of patch it together. So more often than not, that's the kind of thing you'll find in musical theater. They sort of they masquerade as through composed songs, but they're not really through composed songs. Kind of like any bagel you find outside of New York. It's not really a bagel, but they call them bagels.
Well said. Same with slices of pizza for the most part.
That's right.
Oh, how would you advise a songwriter, an up and coming songwriter, or maybe any songwriter for that matter, when and when not to lean into a through composed song? Because to your point, the audience loves repetition. There are, songs that masquerade as through composed, but actually are probably closer to AABA. Yeah, how would you even approach that?
I'm gonna be very honest with this answer, and I would say, especially for an up and coming writer, if you're starting out, I'm gonna say I can't really think of any situation where you'd really truly want to lean into a through composed song for a musical. The only time I could think, maybe there's a character who's just completely ridiculous, known for their non sequiturs or things not making sense, where you might get some comedic mileage out of doing something that's through composed. But by and large, I can't think of very many situations where that's going to be a successful venture.
Here's where I would maybe caveat that, because I think from a development learning standpoint, through compose is one of the more challenging things to be successful in. The caveat I would add though is whoever you are as an artist, if that's how your brain works, that would be why you should do it, right? I don't know if Hamilton has more through composed elements, just given its nature of certain songs being more, rap, hip hop, and just sort of going. I think, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But point being, Lin-Manuel had a very specific style that he knew would work, and he leaned into it, and he was fortunately encouraged to do so. And we got this really unique show. If you are, trained as a 20th century composer or jazz musician or whatever it is, and your brain goes, this sounds cool, and this makes sense for the character, whether it's for comedic reasons like Brett said, or emotional reasons. It's a character who's really upset and they should just sort of move forward. And it sounds cool and it makes sense. We always want to support that. Lean into your art and your voice, but have a reason behind it so that you are choosing it and not just defaulting to it.
Absolutely. And I would always encourage folks to experiment with the form. I mean, that's how we get new and innovative things. You just want to make sure that you're telling a story as effectively as possible and guiding an audience through it as effectively as you can. I mean, that's the goal, right? We got to make sure that we're telling a story to our peeps the way that they can understand it. And I would also say, to your point about Lynn and Hamilton, is that so Lynn is also very steeped in the American musical theater tradition. I mean, he grew up listening to Golden Age musicals, and so he knows the form. He understands how to write within that form, and then he also has this other side of his musical DNA, which incorporates, a lot of hip hop into stuff like Hamilton and In the Heights. And if you really listen closely to the way that those things are structured, they're actually very formally structured, most of them. They just bring in this other musical style that sort of augments it. But at its heart, it's very traditionally styled and formed, a lot of it.
Which is a great reminder that we can use the multiple facets of the medium to support one another. So if we're leaning into a through composed piece and that's your style and you get it, you see it clearly and you want to do that, you can balance that out with maybe the song before it was verse, chorus, or AABA, or maybe the one after, or maybe you commit, this character sings that way, or you're balancing out within the broader story and scenes we're telling, or even like Lin-Manuel does, it sounds so new and so different because maybe from a syllabic perspective, right? Because it's hip hop, each verse, each line has different syllables. You aren't saying it's 10 syllables, 8 syllables, 10 syllables, 10, right? That's being thrown out the window because the medium of hip hop demands you approach it differently. But what is happening underneath, it's still an AABA structure, or it's still a verse chorus structure. And so the ability to combine the different elements can create that balance of repetition and variation.
Absolutely. And you always have to keep in mind who you're writing for. Audiences in general are not going to work as hard as you want them to. So you don't want them to feel like too much of the rug has been pulled out from underneath them, because they most of the time will not venture too far from the things that they can understand and know and feel familiar with.
Right. And the other thing to note, which is similar, is something that Sondheim said a lot, which is in a song, you get one chance, right? A lyric and along with the melody comes and goes just as quickly as it's said, as opposed to poetry or books where you can read and sit with them and be there. Someone sitting in the audience you get that one moment for that lyric to land, and then you've moved on, which is another reason why we just want it to land. So we want to come up with the best combination of things to really connect and have everyone lean forward and have everyone be a part of this story.
Couldn't have said it better.
Anyone listening, if you have some great through composed songs that you think we should re-listen to or examine or find why they work so well, we would love to hear those. Would love to hear any of your thoughts, because it is a really fun and unique and cool way to write and experience a tune when it's done well, but very tricky to pull off. So we'd love to hear about it.
Agreed.
Okay, well, is there anything else you want to dive into on through composed or on song structure before we move on?
I think just being aware that within the forms that we discussed, of course, there are some other song forms, although not as widely used as the ones we've discussed today. But within the forms that we've talked about, there are variations within those forms. So this is something to keep in mind. We don't have time to tackle all of them here, but it's just know that within those forms there are variations to those. So you're not always going to see cookie cutter, examples of those forms, but they're by and large the most frequently used ones.
Absolutely. And the more we know the rules, the more we can also learn how to, adjust them and find the variations, or in the right instances, break the rules and find that variation within repetition. Which, speaking of which, we will talk about part of your world in our bonus content for paid subscribers on Patreon, which I think has a little bit of that.
It does indeed. Yeah, it's fun because it used to follow in its original form. It used to follow more of a standard form, and then when they cut stuff from it, now it's this sort of Frankenstein thing.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about that, and excited for anyone to join us over there on Patreon. So I think that's a good way to wrap it up for today. A reminder to everyone, there's always room to play and, find your own artistic voice, do what you got to do. But as Brett, you said earlier, having these tools at our disposal, knowing the sort of starting point, the foundation to stand on, the ways that songs can be written that aren't just relying on inspiration, and we don't all need to be wandering our way through the woods reinventing things every time. These are the forms, and they're really, really powerful when done well, and I find really, really fun to write when you know what you're writing.
Absolutely. And I'm a firm believer that when you love an art form, you owe it to yourself to understand that art form on a deep level. And then once you understand it, then you experiment.
Exactly. Well, thanks again for joining us today on Showtuned. I had a great time talking with you, Brett. I always have a great time sharing, and we look forward to sharing more with you in the next episode.
Likewise. And of course, we'd always love for you to share this with a friend who loves musicals. So if you know somebody, send this to them and spread the joy and the knowledge.
Absolutely. And we are, as I mentioned, we are on Patreon. We are also on YouTube, since we are recording the video for this as well. And please like, subscribe, share. It's the best way to support the podcast. And we are so excited to keep sharing more with you soon. All right. Thank you.
Bye.